I welcome you all to the 14th lecture of the course titled Psychology of Stress, Health and Well-being. So this is overall the 14th lecture, but it is second lecture of module 5. So before we talk about today's lecture, let us have a brief recap of the last lecture, that is lecture 13. So in the last lecture we discussed about relaxation exercises as a strategy for coping with the stress, and we discussed that the relaxation exercises are kind of becoming very increasingly popular as a way of or as a coping strategy for dealing with stress and anxiety, and there are many such relaxation exercises available. However, we have discussed specifically two such strategies. One is deep breathing and another is called as progressive muscle relaxation. So in the deep breathing we have discussed the deep breathing is also called as abdominal breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. Generally our breathing pattern we have discussed is kind of associated with our mental states. So whenever we get stressed and anxious, generally our breathing patterns become shallow and fast, but when we experience relaxed state of mind, our breathing generally becomes deep and slow. So with this idea that when we experience stress and anxiety, it induces a kind of chest breathing or shallow breathing or fast breathing. So if you can exercise or kind of introduce deep breathing at that time when we are experiencing stress and anxiety, it will change our mental experiences or mental states from anxious to more relaxed state. And we try to see the mechanisms and how it works in the last lecture, and we have also gave the instructions about how to do such exercises. One simple exercises we have kind of demonstrated how we can do such deep breathing exercises. The second concept that we have discussed in the last lecture is called as progressive muscle relaxation. As the name suggests, it kind of induces a relaxation in the body progressively, from progressively one muscle group after another muscle groups throughout the body, and the basic idea in progressive muscle relaxation is that we try to induce first tense a muscle group and then relax it. So this creation of a contrast actually help us to induce much more deeper relaxation state in our body, and it not only just relaxes your mind, but it also relaxes your muscles of the body. And stress in our mind is associated with the stress in the muscles of the body. Specifically, it expresses in terms of aches and pains in our body. And we also discussed the detailed process of progressive muscle relaxation in the last class. So these are a few important concepts that we have discussed in the last lecture. So today we'll talk about the mental ways of coping. So we are discussing various constructive coping strategies, and the last two lectures we have been talking about mostly the physical ways of coping, where we have discussed physical exercise as a coping strategy, then relaxation exercises as a coping strategy. Today we'll talk about how at the mental level we can address the stress and deal with the stress. So mental ways of coping, what are the approaches and what are the things that we need to look at, because most of the time, as we have already discussed in our initial lectures, the stress is largely subjective, and it largely depends on our interpretation of the situation. So thought processes plays very important role in the creation of and experiences of the stress. Therefore, finding the causes at the mental level or at the thought levels is very important. So today we'll look at how try to understand how mind creates stress and at the mental level, what can we do in terms of coping with stress or anxiety, or emotional or psychological issues in general. So it is much more broader than just dealing with stress. It is more about dealing with emotional and psychological issues. So in that context, we will discuss ABC theory of Albert Ellis. We'll also discuss the concepts of irrational and catastrophic thoughts. We'll also discuss how can we reduce irrational catastrophic thoughts as a way of dealing with stress and emotional disturbances. So let's see what are these concepts. So when we talk about mental ways of coping, the idea is that human beings are, especially when we think about our own life, our future, about other people, where there is a lot of subjective elements involved, human beings are imperfect information processor. In the sense, we generally don't process information very objectively, very factually. And as a result of that, many times we develop distortions or dysfunctional thinking patterns in our life. We generally pick them from our environment or because of some conditioning. Generally, most of us develop dysfunctional or distortion in our thinking processes. So whenever we think about various issues of our life, about futures, about other subjective elements, we don't think very factually or very objectively. We don't interpret situations very objectively. There is a lot of dysfunctional and distortions in our thinking processes, and so a large percentage of our thoughts are not actually factual. So we'll see how these are true by giving many examples. And a lot of our thought processes are irrational and colored by our biases, negativities, insecurities, and so on. So most of our thoughts are not factual in the sense that they are colored by our insecurities, our biases, our belief systems, which we picked from our environment, from our societies, from the people around us. And these are kind of projected in whatever we think in our life. So that is the meaning of a lot of thoughts are irrational and distorted. So therefore, many times symptoms of stress, anxiety, and depression, a lot of the psychological and emotional disturbances that we experience in our life are maybe largely caused by such distorted or dysfunctional thought processes. Okay. So therefore, in order to deal with stressful circumstances or various emotional and psychological disturbances, it is important to address our thinking process. It is important to look at our thought processes and how we process information, because root cause can be there. It is important, obviously there are physical ways that we have discussed. These are also very important ways of dealing with, but it is also important to look at our thought processes, because we generate emotions and stress and anxieties in our mind only. So thought processes are basically, they play a very important role. So when we talk about dealing with thought processes, basically the idea is our thoughts and emotions are very strongly connected. So if you see, I'll just draw it here. Emotions, or we can say feelings, they are continuously interacting with each other, and in fact even the third element, our behavior or actions, are also kind of connected with each other. It is also connected. So so these are all interconnected elements of our experience. So the way we think, it will influence our emotions, or our emotions, when it is triggered by something, will influence our thoughts, And thoughts and emotion also influences the actions that we do. So actions don't happen out of blue. They are always influenced by our thoughts and emotions. So they are all interconnected to each other, and that is why we need to address many times the causal factors could be our thought processes. So we need to look at there, which causes a lot of emotional disturbances, including our stressful experiences. So let us understand this whole mechanisms or process of thoughts and emotions and their interconnections using one important model or theory proposed by Albert Ellis, which is called as ABC theory. And this is a very popular theory, which is also the ideas are used in various psychotherapies, especially the cognitive therapies, which addresses our thought processes and tries to solve psychological issues and emotional issues by addressing our thought processes. So ABC theory is very popular in various psychotherapies, and they use these ideas in treating people with many psychological issues. So let us see what is this ABC model is all about. So Albert Ellis, around 1957, he developed rational emotive behavior therapy, which is in short also called as RABT. The basic idea of this therapy is focus on changing our thinking or beliefs or belief patterns or thought processes to reduce maladaptive emotions and behavior. So to change our emotions and behavior, this particular approach developed by Ellis, they try to change our thinking processes. So according to them, it is the thinking processes that influences our emotions and thought process and our actions. So by changing our thinking processes, we can change our emotions, we can change our behaviors or actions. So according to Ellis, we feel the way we think. So basically means our thinking and feeling are kind of corresponding to each other. So if we experience positive thinking, it will lead to positive emotions. If we have negative emotions, it will lead to negative, if you think negatively, it will lead to negative emotions, and vice versa. Negative emotions may stimulate negative thoughts, positive emotions may stimulate positive thoughts. So thoughts and actions are kind of corresponding to each other, and each may influence other. So whatever the kind of emotions we have, we will have similar kind of thought processes in the sense of positive and negative. So therefore feelings can be changed by changing our thought processes. So the idea is you cannot directly change your emotions. It is generally very difficult. So one better approach to change our emotions, particularly negative emotions and disturbing emotions, by changing our thought processes, because it is much easier to change our thought processes than our emotions. So intervention can be done at the thought level. So that is the idea. So according to Ellis, the problematic emotional reactions are caused by negative self-talk or negative thought processes, which Ellis called them irrational or catastrophic thinking. So he said mostly the negative emotions are actually stimulated or caused by irrational or catastrophic thinking. So we'll try to understand what is irrational catastrophic thinking. So our thinking is responsible for this. He tried to explain this whole phenomena of how thoughts influences emotions by using ABC sequence. So what is ABC sequence? Let us try to understand. So ABC model basically is talks about so A is basically activating events. So any event that happens in your life is an activating event that activates certain emotional reactions. B are basically beliefs. Which are mostly unconscious and automatic. C is consequences. Now, so according to Ellis, this is the sequence by which we can explain how emotional reaction happens to an event. So let's say some event happens, which is A, activating event, and you experience some negative emotions, whatever consequences, depression, stress, anxiety, whatever it is. There is something in between the event and the consequence, which is called as B element, which is called as beliefs. So the sequence actually goes like this: A stimulates B or beliefs, event stimulates certain belief system in us or certain thought processes, largely which are automatic, and B ultimately causes C or consequences, emotional consequences, whatever. So some event happens, some negative thing happens in your life, and you feel distress, you feel anxious, you feel stressed, whatever it is. So generally people believe that it is the event that causes C. This is a general belief that we see. So I said I am depressed or I am anxious because I failed in an event or I could not perform an event. So we associate A with C. So we generally think, apparently, that it is the A that is causing all the emotional consequences, such as anxiety, depression, etc. Ellis says this is not right. A actually never causes C. This is not the right pathway. Rather, A causes B and the B ultimately causes C. So what is the meaning is that whenever some event happens in your life, let's say some negative event, it will induce some beliefs in us, some beliefs, the way you think about the event, that you say, my life is doomed, or I'm not, what will happen to me. Some kind of thought processes will kind of stimulated by this event. So how you think about the event, and this thought processes or belief system will ultimately cause emotional consequences such as stress, anxiety, depression. So it is not the event actually that causes consequences, but the belief system that are activated by the event, they are responsible for the consequences. But in general, we think it is the event that is causing all the emotional consequences, which is not right. So this is the model. So let us give an example to understand this. So let's say an event happens in your life, which is you failed in a task. So this is the A activating event, whatever event. Let's say you appeared for an interview and you failed in that. You could not perform well, and you could not get selected there. Whatever it is, it could be anything. You failed in a task. So that is the event, and this event causes let's say C. This event is not so generally. The consequence of this event could be, let's say, it could be whatever, depression, stress, anxiety, etc. And depending on your situation, you may experience various kinds of emotions. Now, Ellis says it is not this failure in a task that is causing depression or anxiety or stress. Failure itself is not causing. What is happening when you failed in a task? It stimulated certain beliefs. Beliefs such as, it could stimulate certain automatic unconscious beliefs such as, I am a failure. I am a worthless person. Etc. etc. There can be many such thought processes may be stimulated by failure in a task. Many times it may happen very automatically and unconsciously. You may not be even aware of it. You fail in a task and automatically you feel, I am a failure in life, and kind of you make it, exaggerate it, and think very negatively. And you may feel I am a worthless person, or I may never be able to get success in life. So many thought processes can come up in your mind, mostly very automatic and unconscious, depending on your conditioning and learning experiences in your past. So these thought processes are actually causing stress and depression, not the failure in an event. So this is actually causing the C part, or consequences of the event. So because there may be many other individuals who might have failed in the same task, and they might not be influenced by it, simply because they are thinking about it in a very different ways. So it is how you think about the event, they are causing the emotional consequences, so not the event itself. So event never actually causes anything. It is how in between the event and consequences, your beliefs and thoughts. So this is the meaning of ABC sequence or ABC model, to understand how our thought processes influences emotions. Now Ellis says primarily all the negative emotions and emotions and various psychological disturbances are caused by irrational and catastrophic thoughts. So he kind of collectively called them as irrational or catastrophic thought processes. So generally, this, because of these irrational thought processes, all these negative emotional and psychological disturbances and disorder actually happens. At least one of the main reason for them. So let us see what are these irrational catastrophic thinking, which happens at the B part in the ABC model and which causes negative emotions. So according to Ellis, an irrational idea or belief has certain characteristics. Some of these characteristics are, irrational beliefs or ideas that distort reality. Okay? For example, in our earlier example, where we said, somebody failed in a task and he is thinking that I am a failure in life. So this is a distortion of reality. Why it is distortion? Because this is not the truth. Failing in one task cannot make you a failure as such in totality of your life. So this person is distorting the reality. It is objectively, if you see, it is a failing in one particular task, but if that person is thinking that it is a failure of my life as such, then it is distortion. Distorting the situation, or the perception is distorted. It is illogical simply because failing in one task cannot lead to failure in whole life as such. So it is illogical thought. Irrational thoughts also prevents you from reaching your goal. So generally, when you exaggerate negative aspects of a situation and other thing, you will not try to act proactively in the future. So it will kind of prevents you from reaching your goals. So you will not do things that are required to reach your goals, simply because you are too pessimistically thinking about it, and it will decrease your motivation level. And it leads to unhealthy emotions. We have already seen emotions are directly related to our thought processes. So the moment you say I am a failure in life, it is bound to cause a lot of emotional disturbances. You are bound to experience depression and sadness in your life. And it leads to self-defeating behavior. So behaviors that will actually create obstacles in reaching your goals. We have already discussed that. because you once your motivation is decreased and once you see things pessimistically, you will not do the right things to reach your goal. So you will kind of avoid things, avoidance strategies will be used, and they will be kind of self-defeating behaviors. So these are some of the important characteristics of irrational or catastrophic thinking. So Albert Ellis was a therapist, and he has long experience of from his experiences with the patients with the psychological issues and disturbances. He found obviously there are many such irrational thought processes are prevalent among human beings, but some thought processes are very common, and they are based on demands about ourselves, about others, about the environment. So based on what we expect from from our own self, from other people around us, from the environment around us. Based on that, he said these three important irrational beliefs are there. Obviously there are many variations to that can happen. There may be many other irrational beliefs, but he found these three are more common among people. One is, I must be outstandingly competent or I am worthless. This is one common irrational belief, prevalent among human beings. So you always want to be outstandingly competent, or otherwise you will experience, experience that I am worthless person. Second is, others must treat me considerably or they are absolutely rotten. So you have a lot of expectation from other people around you that they should always treat you with considerable approval and love, etc. Third, the world should always give me happiness. So it's a kind of implicit belief that I should always get happiness from the world. So if I generally ask whether people in general, whether you subscribe to this kind of thought processes, many may consciously think they don't subscribe to this kind of thought processes. But if you see human behavior, it reflects they are kind of dwells on this kind of thought processes. For example, if just somebody indicates some slight rejection, somebody whom they care and love, if they reject you in some ways, many people experience devastating negative emotions. Why that person rejects me? So indirectly, what is happening? You believe that people around you should always accept you, approve you with love and affection. You may not, if I ask you consciously, you may not say I believe in that, but from your behavior it is evident that you believe that. So this may be very unconsciously rooted in our mind. So little bit of failure and rejection and sufferings disturb people so much simply because they have this kind of deeper belief systems, which many people may consciously may not be aware of them. So these are there may be many such irrational beliefs, but if you see these irrational beliefs, one thing is they are very absolute statement. You always want that something must happen in your life, or something never should happen, something should always happen. So this kind of absolute statements are characteristics of these irrational beliefs and thought processes. So can you, for example, think why are these very irrational thoughts? Why these thoughts are called as irrational thoughts? Let's say the second thought, which is very common among people, that others must treat me always must treat me. Must is a kind of absolute statement. Must treat me, always treat me considerably with approval and love. So why do you think this is an irrational thought? What could be the reason behind it? So if you think little bit logically, you can find such thoughts are irrational simply because it is impossible to be liked by all people around you. It is simply not possible, and nobody is liked by everybody. There will always be some people who may not like you. There will be some people who will like you, simply because people have different taste and liking. So some may like your qualities, some may not like your qualities. Even though you may be very popular and very good in terms of nature, some people simply don't like good people. So what can you do about it? So I mean, it is simply impossible. The people whom we worship maybe after death, the great people, while they were alive, there were so many oppositions and the criticisms and disliking from the society they experienced. So it is simply not in the nature that everybody will like you or always approve you. It is simply not possible. So that is why it is irrational thinking to expect that everybody around you kind of will always approve you and always affectionately behave with you. And also the problem is if you always try to impress other, there is nothing wrong in becoming popular and impressing other people, but if you try too hard all the time to impress other people, one thing is that you will not have time and energy to do things that you like. You will be always trying to running behind other people and impressing them, which may not be good in long term. And people also get tired of if you try too much to impress them. So in that sense, such thought processes are illogical and irrational. So we have so many such irrational thoughts which are actually causing a lot of emotional disturbances. When a lot of these sufferings are actually self-created. We have discussed in the characteristics of stress that a lot of stressful and negative emotional experiences are actually self-created. When we say that, we are trying to say that by this kind of thought processes. Many times objectively there is a reason for being disturbed by something, but many times it is exaggerated by such thoughts. So these catastrophic thinking are based on irrational assumptions, as we have tried to see how they are irrational, and these are mostly automatic, habitual and unconscious. Mostly, sometimes it can be conscious also. So something happens and it automatically gets activated in your mind because of your past conditioning. These are very automatic, unconscious thoughts. So that is why you may not be aware of them, that they are working in your mind. So these beliefs take the shape of absolute statement mostly and has many thinking errors, such as they ignore the positive aspects of things. So if one negative thing happened and you simply exaggerating it so much that you are not seeing that there are many positive aspects to your life also. So let's say in our last example, you fail in one task and you are saying my life is a failure. So you are exaggerating the negative part too much, and you are ignoring that so many positive things has also happened in your life. So you are ignoring the positive, exaggerating the negative and overgeneralizing them. So you failed in one particular domain or aspect of life or area of life, and you are kind of attributing it to every other aspect of your life. So that is the meaning of overgeneralization. So you are generalizing it to other aspects of your life where it is not connected. So these are other qualities of irrational thoughts or characteristics of irrational thoughts. So the important question is, obviously, now we understood that such irrational thoughts are causing a lot of emotional disturbances in us in many situations where our sufferings could be self-created by such thoughts, where we should not suffer so much objectively, but we are exaggerating them, and suffering how sufferings are kind of blown out of proportion. So it is important to understand how can we reduce such thought processes, such irrational thought processes, so that our negative emotional experiences can be minimized. So because such thoughts will be there, you cannot completely eradicate them, but at least we can reduce them. So that is the idea. So the major aim of rational emotive behavior therapy of Ellis, the whole therapeutic approach, the whole idea is to reduce such irrational thoughts. So in a therapy, primarily a professional helps you to detect them and kind of come out of them. So reduce the irrational thinking using our logical and rational faculties. So when you know that something is irrational, to remove something which is irrational, the only thing that we can do is to use rational faculties, use our logical faculties. Then only we can see something as irrational. So using our rational faculties, logical faculties to reduce irrational thinking is the purpose of a lot of therapies, particularly rational emotive behavior therapies and other cognitive therapies. So in this way, we'll be able to change our emotional experiences in the positive directions. So this is how emotions are changed, by changing our thinking processes. So generally there are two steps involved in it, in terms of reducing catastrophic or irrational thoughts. So these steps, professionals can help you also in that way, and sometimes we can also use these steps on our own also to deal with our irrational thoughts. So first step is detecting irrational thoughts. So before we can do anything about something, we need to detect it. We need to understand that it is there. So detection is very important. Half of our task is actually the detection part. Many people are not able to detect it. They are not they are not even aware that such thoughts are there. So detection is very important. If you become aware that such thoughts are there and such thoughts are causing problems, then most of our problem will be automatically solved, because that these are the issues. So detection is very important. So detection is the first part of it, and the second part is disputing them. Once you know that such thoughts are there, the next important thing is to dispute them by using our rational faculties and logical faculties. So let us see in a more detailed way how can this be done. So detecting irrational thought is very important, as I said. So first thing is we need to try to find out a thought. How do we detect any thoughts? How do you know that certain thoughts are there in your mind? How can we detect our thought processes? So if you observe your mind, our thoughts are primarily manifested in either in the form of self-talk, that you talk to yourself in terms of language. So it expresses in terms of talking, in terms of most of the time we are talking to ourselves. If you observe yourself, even though when peoples are not around you, continuously we are talking to ourselves. So these talking are basically thought processes that are going on in your mind. So that is why language is so important in mental development. Without language we cannot really have an sophisticated thought processes. So it is the language that is an important tool for expressing complex thought processes. So that is why human beings have evolved language system. So they have evolved thought processes. So this is very important. So detection of any thought is primarily looking at how you talk to yourself. So this is one important way. Another is obviously in terms of images and imageries we think. But mostly our thought processes are expressed in terms of self-talk, the talking that we do, in terms of language. So you observe how are you basically talking to yourself? What are the content of that talk? This is the way to detect a thought. So for detecting an irrational thought, it is important you ask yourself, why are you getting upset? So let's say something happened, and you are getting upset. So ask yourself, why are you getting upset? So from emotion you are tracing back to the thoughts that is causing that emotion. By asking this question, you trace back the thoughts which are causing that emotion. So let's say you are feeling depressed or feeling sad or feeling stressed about something. Then when you ask why I am getting stressed about it, why I am getting sad about it, so you will see what is the thought that is causing it. So we'll give more examples so that you can understand it. So ask yourself why you are getting upset. So by that question you can trace the thoughts that are causing these emotional disturbances. Then it will become much easier. Then examine your self-talk closely to find out irrational thoughts and expectations. So I say, no, how you are talking, what is the content of your self-talk that you are talking to yourself. You can detect irrational thoughts from there. Try to spot unrealistic pessimism and exaggeration in your thinking. From your self-talk, you can identify, am I really exaggerating it too much? Is there any evidence to it, or it is just my own mental makeup, or kind of I am creating them on my own? Am I exaggerating it? I'm too much exaggerating this, or are there any objective truth in it? See if you are using keywords such as never, must, always. These are important indicators of irrational thoughts. That irrational thoughts are mostly absolute statements. It must happen, it should always happen. So those kind of absolute statements are kind of key characteristics of irrational thoughts. So you can look this, try to find out these absolute statements. Are you really thinking in terms of absolute statements? Are you exaggerating too much? So from your emotions, try to trace back, see your self-talk, observe them, and try to detect what are the thought processes that are going on. So many times detecting such thought may become difficult, especially when we are highly caught up by emotions. That is why many times our support system works very well. Other people can detect it very easily. You can talk in certain ways and other people will immediately say, no, this is not the right way of looking at things. Why are you thinking like that? So our people around us will kind of also helps us to detect. So social support is so important. That is why and if you are going to a professional, obviously a professional can help you to detect that also. But if you are motivated enough, you can detect it on your own also. So this is some of the things that you can do to detect and irrational thoughts. The next part is disputing irrational beliefs or thoughts. This is, so once you now detected that something is irrational in me, how do you dispute or kind of reject them and replace them with more healthy thoughts? So Albert Ellis said, for disputing irrational beliefs, we should employ our reasoning process to remove the irrationality. So Albert Ellis proposed at least these 5 important questions that you can ask to dispute or to kind of reject or dispute such or debate these irrational beliefs. One question is, what is the self-defeating irrational beliefs that I want to dispute? So that is basically detecting. First you need to detect what is that thought that is disturbing me. From your emotions you can trace it back. Second question you should to ask, what evidence exists of the falseness of those beliefs? Are there any evidence to this belief that I am kind of continuously thinking about it, or is it kind of my own mental creation? What are the evidences for falseness you can try to see? Or another way of looking at it is the third question, does any evidence exist for the truth of this belief? It's kind of looking at the same thing from 2 different angles. Is it true or is it false? Both ways you look at it. What is the worst thing that can happen if I give up this belief? So I am so disturbed by it. What will happen if I just simply don't reject this belief? Since it is disturbing so much, what is the worst thing that will happen? Ask yourself. You can also ask, what is the best thing that can happen if I give up this belief? So these are some of the important questions that you can ask to kind of dispute your irrational beliefs. So let us see an examples to understand this process. So I took an example from albertellis.org and a website. So they gave an example from there, we can understand. So the first question that Albert Ellis proposed is, what is the self-defeating irrational beliefs that I want to dispute? So let's say here we take an example that this person is disturbed by, maybe probably a rejection from someone that person, care for or love some person, and he experienced some rejection and he is disturbed by it. So this person, when trace back the thoughts, he find that he is disturbed because he has this belief that I must receive love from someone whom I really care, because I really care about this person, love this person, but this person is not kind of returning back. So, and you have this belief, I must get approval and affection from that person. So this is the irrational thought that person is having. So you detected that. The next question you can ask, what evidence does exist of the falseness of this belief? So you kind of now disputing the thought process once you detected that. So some of the evidences can be like that no law of the universe exists that says that someone I care must love me. So you don't have control over others' behavior. You might love somebody, or you may love somebody, you may care about somebody, but you don't know how that person will behave. It is not necessary that person who is always will return back with the same kind of affection and love, because you don't have control over that person. So simply, these beliefs may not hold that you must get in return the same reciprocal behavior. So it is simply may not be true. If I do not receive love from one person, I can still get it from others and find happiness that way. So getting just disturbed by it may not be the right approach in the sense, because it is just one person and you still have many other people around you and in your life from whom you may get a lot of love and affection. If no one I care for ever cares for me, which is very unlikely, I still can find enjoyment in friendship, in works and books and in other things. If someone I deeply care for rejects me, that will be the most unfortunate. It is maybe you may not like about it, there may be sadness around it, but I will hardly die, or it is not end of my life or something. So if you logically and objectively think about it, then this thought may not be very rational. So these are some of the evidences of its falseness, in terms of it is not a very rational thought process. So you can see some of these arguments in terms of disputing it. The next question, does any evidence exist for the truth of this belief? No, not really. Considerable evidence exists that if I love someone dearly and never am loved in return, that I will then find myself disadvantaged, inconvenienced, frustrated and deprived. Not necessarily. If you don't get in return what you are expecting, it doesn't make you a life of disadvantaged life or frustrated or deprived life. So there is no evidence for it. So simply it is not very rational thing to look at. I certainly would prefer therefore not to get rejected, but no amount of inconvenience amounts to horror. I can still stand frustration and loneliness. So these are some of the statements that shows it is not a very true thought process that you are dwelling on. What is the worst thing that can happen if you give up this belief? So maybe you may think I would get deprived of various possible pleasures and inconveniences. So you had certain expectation about that person. So if that relationship doesn't work, there may be some inconveniences and issues in life. That is okay. But you can always find newer relationships in your life. This is not the end of road. So this can be the worst thing that can happen only. So the kind of emotions that you are generating may be very exaggerated, which may not be true. What is the best that can happen if you give up these beliefs? If you give up this belief, there may be some advantage to it also. For example, I could devote more time and energy to winning someone else's love and probably find someone better for me. I could devote myself to other enjoyable pursuits that I have little to do with loving or relating, such as work and artistic endeavor. I could find it challenging and enjoyable to teach myself to live happily without love. So there can be so many other ways of looking at the same thing, which you are thinking as a kind of problems and disadvantage, but there may be so many other aspects which may be positive also. So by this you can kind of dispute an irrational thought and find out why it is false, why it is not true, and it may not be that bad actually. Ultimately, if you spend some time when your emotions kinds of decreases and intensity goes down, you may many times find something which you are thinking very disadvantage in your life actually turning out to be something of advantage, or something of opening newer opportunities in your life. So we don't know. So all these things can happen. So these are some of the ways, some of the questions that you can use to dispute an irrational thought. So you can do this kind of simple exercises in your life. Whenever you get disturbed, you can trace out whether am I getting disturbed simply because of some irrational thought. Obviously you may get disturbed because of really an objective situation or real situation. That is okay, there is no problem. Here we are talking about disturbances that are caused by irrational thoughts, illogical thoughts, which are exaggerated, self-created. So we can minimize them. We are not saying all disturbances are not, we should not have any disturbances in life. There are many objective situations which disturbs us and that are really valid, but many of them is a kind of exaggerated by irrational thoughts. So we need to intervene in those stages. So we can use a simple chart to kind of do this exercise. So So we can take just earlier examples to make it more simple. So you can do similar exercises. Activating event could be failure in a task. Consequences could be sadness, anxiety, stress. You can trace out your beliefs. Belief, as I said, I am a failure. Then you can kind of dispute them by detecting. Once you have detected them, you can dispute them by asking questions such as how do I become a total failure if I do not succeed in one task. So similarly, you can use many other questions that we have discussed. You can use all these questions to kind of dispute your irrational thoughts. So you can use simple charts like that, to do this exercise, and it is also generally, many times we are not able to come out on your own when you are really emotionally engrossed in something. It is always better to take help from people around us, our near and dear people, our friends, our family members, and many times it may require professional intervention also, where they can also help out. So these are the important things. So you can do these simple exercises in your life. Most of the time it can be done on your own also, but obviously in extreme cases we need support from other people also. So final thought is basically, it is reported that it may take time and practice in changing our beliefs. So it is not so easy. It may take time and practice. We need to continually work on recognizing our irrational beliefs and and disputing them and transforming our negative emotions into positive emotions. So it may take some time. So understanding this whole process is very important, because many times we dwell on simple irrational thoughts and they really disturbs us so much. So simple thoughts, which are irrational absolute thoughts, and they are very important that you replace them with more healthy thoughts. For example, just somebody rejects one person and you simply start believing that everybody hates me, and it is actually rejection from one person, and that person start talking about nobody likes me, everybody hates me, and that person is not looking at there are so many other people who kind of shows love towards that person. So this is we dwell on such small thoughts which really causes a lot of disturbances. So it is very important that we need to do more self reflection and self observation. We need to be vigilant about our thought processes, and this is an important and unique human quality, that we can observe ourselves. This is one of the gift of human beings, that we can observe ourselves. We can look at our own selves and judge what is wrong and what is right, and we need to use this quality and faculty and this gift that is given to us. Do more self reflection, be vigilant to your thought processes, observe how you are thinking and how it is affecting you. And by changing our thoughts, because a lot of thoughts can be changed very easily, and replacing them with more healthy thoughts, we can kind of change our emotions and make our life more full of positive emotions and happiness. So these are some of the thoughts about mental ways of coping. We can understand this, use them in our life and benefit from it. So with this I will end today's lecture. Thank you.